Have you ever concluded a conversation or an interaction with a vague, lingering sense that something was amiss? That unsettling intuition that the choices you made were not entirely your own, that you had been subtly steered toward an outcome that served someone else's interests more than your own? Perhaps you agreed to a significant favor that left you drained of time and energy, conceded an argument you knew deep down you were right about, or placed your trust in a person who later revealed a completely different and disappointing intention. If this feeling is hauntingly familiar to you, then understand this: you are not alone in this experience, and it is not a simple coincidence or a failure of your judgment. You have experienced the unmistakable signature of psychological manipulation, a pervasive force in human interaction. The brutal, liberating truth is that manipulation is not a rare or dramatic art practiced only by shadowy figures in movies. It is a constant, daily reality of modern life. It happens within the walls of your home and the dynamics of your workplace, through the screens that deliver your news and social media, and in your closest, most cherished relationships. It is executed with precision by those who have learned, either through intuitive talent or careful study, how to operate the hidden levers of the human psyche, leveraging our deepest needs and fears against us. And the most masterful, insidious trick of all? The most effective manipulation is completely invisible. It doesn't feel like coercion or force. It feels like your own original idea, your own free will in action. It leaves you believing you are in full control, that the subsequent mistake was yours alone to own, the guilt is yours to carry, and the responsibility is yours to bear. Most people live their entire lives as unwitting pieces on a grand chessboard, completely unaware that a complex game is even being played, silently guided across the board by hands they cannot see and strategies they do not comprehend. When they feel a spark of internal resistance, a gut feeling that says this isn't right, it is quickly extinguished by emotions that have been expertly trained: deep-seated guilt, profound fear, and crippling self-doubt. If you are reading this and a part of your mind is thinking, "This is interesting, but it doesn't really happen to me," I urge you to pause and consider that thought carefully. That exact illusion of immunity, that confident belief in your own invulnerability, is the primary and most cherished goal of any skilled manipulator. This message is not one of comfort or gentle reassurance. It is a call to intellectual arms, a summons to vigilant awareness. It is an offer of concrete tools, actionable strategies, and the ruthless clarity first articulated by the Renaissance's ultimate strategist, Machiavelli. Those who truly master the art of influence understand that they do not need to shout, threaten, or make overt demands. Their power lies in silence and observation. They watch with surgical precision. They identify your deepest insecurities and most potent desires, and they apply psychological pressure exactly where you are weakest and most vulnerable. They know what drives you, what motivates you, what you crave, and what you fear. And if you do not know your own inner drivers, if you are not intimately acquainted with your own psychological landscape, you will inevitably be driven by them and by anyone else who takes the time to map them. This moment is your awakening. You will learn to decipher the hidden patterns of psychological control, the emotional traps, the linguistic tricks, the subtle and not so subtle games of power that are played every day. You will be guided to conduct a full audit of your own vulnerabilities, and finally, you will learn how to fortify your mind against them like a psychological fortress. For true freedom is not merely the superficial ability to do what you want. It is the profound self-knowledge to understand why you want it in the first place, to discern whether your desires are truly your own or implants placed there by a clever operator. This is a summons for those who are tired of being used, for those who have been silenced, blamed, and conditioned to doubt their own reality. This is where you learn to step out of the role of the puppet and consciously, deliberately step into the role of the strategist, taking control of your own agency. But be warned, this knowledge comes with a price, Once you see the intricate mechanisms of control, once your eyes are open to the countless games being played around you, you can never unsee them. Your relationships, your perception of the world, and your very sense of self will look different from this moment on. There is no going back to blissful ignorance. Have you ever sat back and wondered with a sense of frustration how certain individuals seem to effortlessly bend reality to their will, consistently getting exactly what they want from others and from life itself? They don't make loud demands, issue overt threats, or resort to pathetic begging. Instead, they persuade with a calm assuredness. They engage with focused intensity. They masterfully craft interactions so that you feel that acquiescing to their desire was your own brilliant and autonomous idea, leaving you feeling smart and independent rather than used. This is not mere charisma or likability. It is a calculated, rehearsed technique, applied psychology in its purest and most effective form. A master manipulator is never impulsive. They are perpetual students of human nature, always watching, always learning. They study you like a textbook, analyzing everything from your speech patterns to your body language, from your emotional triggers to your deepest insecurities. They notice your subtle reactions to certain words, your unconscious body language when you're uncomfortable, and the specific ways you seek validation or avoid conflict. This information becomes their strategic blueprint, their playbook for influence. They might use charm as their weapon of choice, employing calculated compliments and manufactured empathy to create a sense of special connection, all while building an unspoken emotional debt they know you'll feel compelled to repay. Or they might adopt the victim persona, weaving narratives of hardship and misunderstanding that position you as their reluctant savior, using guilt as an invisible leash to guide your actions. Then there are the fearmongerers, who expertly paint pictures of impending doom and disaster should you dare to disobey or distance yourself, knowing that anxiety can be a more powerful motivator than desire. These strategies are not random. They are deliberate and targeted, designed to bypass your logical mind and speak directly to your emotional core. The manipulator understands a fundamental truth that most miss. People make decisions based on emotion and justify them with logic. Therefore, controlling the emotional landscape of an interaction means controlling the outcome. They become architects of perception, carefully constructing reality not as it is, but as they need you to see it, making their desired outcome appear to be the most natural, logical, and even desirable conclusion. This psychological puppeteering is so subtle and so sophisticated that you're never aware of the strings attached to your limbs, believing all your movements to be of your own volition, while in truth, every step has been carefully choreographed to lead you exactly where the puppeteer always intended you to go. This elaborate theater of psychological manipulation only works because it is performed on a stage that already exists within you. It preys upon what you haven't yet faced in yourself, the unacknowledged emptiness, the emotional blind spots, the unresolved wounds from past experiences that continue to whisper doubts into your present moments. You are not manipulated because you are weak or inadequate. You are manipulated precisely because you are human. And to be human is to carry vulnerabilities, some visible, many hidden, that can be expertly exploited by those who know how to look for them. Consider the profound need for approval that lives within so many of us, planted in childhood when we learned that affection and validation were conditional rewards for good behavior, for achievement, for putting others' needs before our own. This early lesson creates a hungry void, an insatiable need for external validation that becomes an open invitation for the manipulator,
who need only offer tiny crumbs of praise or recognition to trigger your deep-seated programming to please and reciprocate, effectively trading your autonomy for morsels of the acceptance you crave. Others carry the heavy, often invisible burden of guilt, conditioned to believe that setting boundaries is selfish, that saying no is failure, that prioritizing oneself is somehow a moral failing rather than an act of basic self-preservation. This internalized guilt becomes a powerful lever in the hands of a manipulator who can easily position themselves as the victim or the righteous authority, making your every independent thought or action feel like a personal betrayal that must be atoned for through compliance and self-sacrifice. Then there are those governed by primal fears of abandonment, of being unworthy, of facing life's challenges alone, whose survival instinct makes them cling to any connection, even a toxic one, as if it were a lifeline. The manipulator recognizes this terror of isolation and expertly positions themselves as both the solution and the threat, offering the illusion of security while simultaneously holding over your head the terrifying prospect of withdrawing it, knowing your fear will keep you locked in place far more effectively than any physical restraint. What makes these vulnerabilities so potent is that they're often woven into the very fabric of our identity. We mistake our people-pleasing for kindness, our guilt for conscience, our fear for devotion, making it nearly impossible to recognize when these traits are being weaponized against us. These psychological soft spots don't emerge from nowhere. They are the living legacy of past hurts, childhood conditioning, and societal messages that taught us to distrust our own needs and prioritize the comfort of others. Until we bring conscious awareness to these hidden drivers of our behavior, until we courageously examine how our past continues to shape our present reactions, we remain unwitting collaborators in our own manipulation, providing the very leverage others use to control us. The painful truth is that the manipulator doesn't create these vulnerabilities. They simply find them, recognize their utility, and skillfully exploit what already exists, turning your deepest human needs against you in a psychological campaign where you both supply the weapons and suffer the casualties.
The journey from being manipulated to becoming psychologically fortified requires more than simple awareness. It demands the deliberate forging of emotional armor through consistent practice and brutal self-honesty, beginning with the painful recognition that our deepest virtues often become our greatest vulnerabilities when left unguarded. The initial step in this transformation involves conducting a thorough audit of your psychological landscape, meticulously examining your automatic responses to identify your unique triggers, those specific emotional buttons that manipulators instinctively push to elicit predictable reactions. This requires developing the ability to pause in the midst of emotional tension, to create a sacred space between stimulus and response, where you can ask yourself critical questions. Why does this particular criticism sting so deeply? Why does that tone of voice make me instantly compliant? What childhood wound does this dynamic activate? This practice of self-observation is the foundation upon which all other defenses are built, for you cannot protect vulnerabilities you haven't acknowledged. The second layer of your armor involves cultivating what ancient strategists would call disciplined detachment. Not emotional coldness, but the ability to witness interactions from a slight psychological distance, allowing you to see the manipulation attempt as a strategy being deployed, rather than getting swept up in the emotional current it creates. This means learning to listen to the words being spoken while simultaneously reading the hidden script beneath them, asking yourself not, how does this make me feel, but what is this person trying to accomplish by making me feel this particular way at this specific moment? The third crucial element involves strategic unpredictability, consciously breaking your established response patterns to disrupt the manipulator's psychological map of you, which might mean responding to anger with calmness, to guilt tripping with boundary setting, to pressure with deliberate delay. thereby introducing enough uncertainty into their calculations to make you a less appealing target. Your emotional armor must also include the development of what can only be called psychological sovereignty, the unshakable conviction that your worth, your reality, and your boundaries are not subject to external validation or negotiation, that your no needs no justification beyond your having spoken it, and that your presence in any relationship is a choice rather than a necessity. This profound shift in self-perception transforms you from someone who needs to be liked into someone who demands to be respected, a transition that fundamentally alters how others approach you. Finally, your armor must include what the ancient philosophers called practical wisdom, the discernment to know when to engage and when to walk away, when to speak your truth and when to maintain strategic silence, understanding that not every battle merits your energy, and that sometimes the most powerful response is to simply remove yourself from the game entirely. This comprehensive emotional armor isn't built in a day, but forged through daily practice, through the countless small moments when you choose self-respect over harmony, truth over comfort, and authenticity over approval, until these choices become your new natural instinct, creating a psychological fortress that is not only impenetrable to manipulation, but radiates a quiet authority that discourages would-be manipulators from even attempting their games.
The most devastating and complex form of psychological manipulation occurs not from strangers or obvious adversaries, but from those who claim to love us, the intimate partners, family members, and close friends who wield influence from within the inner sanctum of our trust and affection. This variety of control is particularly insidious because it wears the mask of love and concern, making it extraordinarily difficult to recognize and even harder to confront without feeling like you're betraying the relationship itself. These manipulators operate from a position of privileged access, using their intimate knowledge of your history, your vulnerabilities, and your deepest desires as precision instruments to shape your behavior while maintaining plausible deniability through the language of care and protection. The romantic partner who isolates you for your own good, the parent who uses financial support as a means of controlling life choices, the friend who weaponizes your shared history to guilt you into compliance, all follow the same fundamental playbook of leveraging emotional intimacy as a tool of coercion rather than a bond of mutual support. What makes this dynamic so psychologically damaging is the cognitive dissonance it creates. How can someone who claims to love you simultaneously cause you such confusion and pain? The answer often lies in the manipulator's own unresolved wounds and distorted understanding of relationships, where control masquerades as care and possession is mistaken for devotion. They may genuinely believe they're acting in your best interests, which makes their manipulations all the more convincing and your resistance all the more guilt-inducing. Breaking free from this web requires navigating the treacherous waters of confronting someone you care about while battling your own fears of abandonment, ingratitude, and losing what might be your most significant relationship. The path forward demands courageous honesty, both with yourself about the reality of the dynamic and with the other person about the unacceptable nature of their behavior, coupled with the heartbreaking acceptance that sometimes love must be practiced from a distance if it cannot exist without control. This journey inevitably forces a redefinition of what love actually means, distinguishing between the healthy interdependence of mature relationships and the parasitic dependency that manipulation creates, ultimately leading you to the profound realization that true love never requires the surrender of your autonomy, your voice, or your truth. In an era where manipulation has evolved into a sophisticated art form practiced not only by individuals but by corporations, media entities, and digital platforms, we must turn to timeless strategic wisdom to build what can only be called a Machiavellian shield, a comprehensive psychological defense system rooted in the principles articulated by Niccolò Machiavelli, but adapted for contemporary reality. This approach begins with the fundamental recognition that human nature remains constant even as technology advances, and that the same drivers of fear, desire, and self-interest that Machiavelli observed in Renaissance courts now play out in corporate boardrooms, social media feeds, and intimate relationships. The first principle of this shield involves developing what intelligence operatives call situational awareness, a constant, subtle monitoring of your environment and the people in it, not with paranoia, but with pragmatic observation, learning to read the subtle signs of manipulation as they emerge rather than after the damage is done. This requires understanding the new currencies of influence, not just words and actions, but algorithms designed to capture attention, social validation metrics weaponized to create dependency, and emotional triggers embedded in content specifically engineered to bypass rational thought. The second principle embraces Machiavelli's famous pragmatism, the willingness to see human behavior as it is rather than as we wish it to be, abandoning naive assumptions about others' motivations while maintaining your own ethical center, what might be called strategic integrity, where you protect yourself without becoming what you defend against. The third component involves mastering the art of information control in an age of overwhelming data, learning to curate your informational environment as carefully as a nation guards its borders, recognizing that whatever enters your mind, whether news, entertainment, or social media, shapes your perceptions and therefore your vulnerabilities. This shield also requires what modern psychologists call source-critical thinking, the ability to reverse engineer every message to understand its origin, its purpose, and its desired effect on your behavior, asking not just is this true, but why does someone want me to believe this is true? And what action does this belief make me more likely to take? Finally, the Machiavellian shield demands the development of strategic patience, the ability to resist immediate emotional responses in favor of calculated, timed actions that serve your long-term interests rather than someone else's immediate agenda. This comprehensive approach transforms you from a passive recipient of influence into an active strategist in your own life, capable of navigating a world saturated with manipulation attempts while maintaining autonomy, clarity, and purpose. By applying these ancient principles to modern challenges, you create not just a temporary defense, but a lasting foundation for psychological sovereignty in an age that increasingly treats human attention and emotion as commodities to be captured and controlled.